Get comfortable. Wherever you are tonight, let your shoulders come down from around your ears, and let the day you had go on ahead without you, because it doesn't need you anymore, and you don't need it. This is a quiet one. There's no shouting in it, no one to be angry at, nothing you have to brace for. It is just the story of a man, a girl, a cold house in Oregon, and one small question asked at a kitchen table, and where that question, years later, finally led. Settle in. Let the lamp go low. I'll tell it slowly, the way these things actually happen, and you can drift off whenever you like, because the ending is a warm one, and it will still be here in the morning. The house sat at the end of a gravel road outside a small town in the Willamette Valley. The kind of town with one good diner, a hardware store that still cut keys, and rain that came in November and mostly forgot to leave until spring. It was a modest house, a single story with a covered porch and a wood stove nobody used because the furnace did the work. And on a particular January night, more than 10 years before the wedding I'm going to tell you about, that furnace died. It died the way they always do, at the worst possible hour, in the coldest week of the year. The woman who lived there was named Dana, and she was 26 that winter, and she was standing in her kitchen in 2 sweaters at 9 at night with a baby on her hip, and her breath showing faintly in the air of her own home. The baby was a girl named Lily, not quite 2, pink-cheeked and furious about the cold in the way that only a very small person can be furious. And Dana had already tried the thermostat a dozen times and put a space heater in the nursery and called the only heating company still answering its phone that late. The man who knocked on her door 40 minutes later, stamping the mud off his boots, was named Ray. He was 31 then, though he looked older, the way men who work with their hands in the cold tend to. He had a heating and cooling business that was really just him, a van, and a phone that rang at all hours. And he had come out on a night most people would have let go to voicemail, because he had a rule about houses with kids in them in January. You go. You just go. So he went. He found the problem in 20 minutes, a cracked igniter and a blower motor on its last legs. And he did the thing that, looking back, tells you everything about him. He didn't just quote her the repair and leave her cold until a part came in. He nursed that dying furnace back to life with something he had in the van, got the house warm enough for the baby to sleep, and told Dana he'd be back in the morning with the real part, and they'd settle up then. He was back at 7. And, if you want to know the truth of how a family begins, it wasn't a lightning strike, and it wasn't a movie. It was a man who kept coming back. He fixed the furnace properly, and then he noticed the gutter hanging off the porch, and he fixed that too, and he didn't charge her for it. A week later, he came by to make sure the furnace was holding, which furnaces do not actually require, and stayed for a cup of coffee. That was the whole beginning. A warm kitchen, a fixed furnace, and a man who noticed what needed doing and quietly did it. Now I want to tell you about the name that was already on Lily's birth certificate, because it matters to where this is going. And then I am going to mostly set it down, the way the people in this story eventually learned to. His name was Shane. He and Dana had been very young, and it had been brief. And by the time Lily was born, he was already halfway out the door, frightened in the specific way of a young man who has realized that a baby is not an idea, but a person who will need him every single day for the rest of his life. He signed the birth certificate. And then, over the years that followed, he sent nothing, and he called twice. I want to be fair to Shane, because this is a gentle story and not a cruel one, and cruelty would be easy and cheap here. He was not a monster. He was a scared kid who made himself smaller and smaller in that little girl's life until he had almost entirely disappeared. And the truth is that disappearing is its own kind of choice, made not once, but 1,000 times. Every birthday that went by without a card, every winter he didn't wonder if the house was warm. We can feel sorry for who he might have been, and still be honest about who he was, which was gone. So there was the paper, in a drawer, with his name on it. And there was the man who came back. For the first year or two, Ray was careful. He did not move too fast, and he did not try to be anything to Lily that he had not earned. He was Dana's first, slowly and then surely. And he was around, and being around, it turns out, is most of it. He learned that Lily hated the seam in her socks and would scream about it until you turned them inside out. He learned which songs put her down and which ones wound her up. He learned one long night when she was 3 and burning up with a fever and Dana was working a double, how to sit in a steamed-up bathroom at 2 a.m. with a hot, miserable toddler on his chest, singing very quietly and very badly until the coughing eased. And he kept the house warm. I keep coming back to that, because they did too. There was one winter when Lily was 9, when the business hit a slow patch, and a big repair on the van ate the whole cushion, and money got tight in the way that keeps grown-ups awake doing arithmetic in the dark. Lily never knew. That was the entire point. Ray and Dana ate a lot of beans and eggs that winter, and told her it was a fun new thing they were trying. And the thermostat never once went down, not a single degree, because Ray had decided, somewhere deep in himself, that whatever else went short in that house, his daughter was never going to see her own breath in her own kitchen the way her mother had on the night he first knocked at the door. A warm house was the promise. He paid a great deal to keep it, in ways she wouldn't understand for years. That is the thing about becoming a father when no one is watching for it. It happens in the dark, in the small hours, in 100 unremarkable acts that no certificate records. There is no ceremony for the first time a man cleans up a sick child at 2 a.m. without being asked. There is no paper for the day you learn to braid hair. There were the lunches, too, which became Ray's job by a kind of silent treaty, since he was up first for the early service calls anyway. Every school morning for years he packed Lily's lunch, and somewhere along the way he started tucking a note into it. Nothing grand, just a line on a torn scrap of paper in his blocky, all-capital handwriting. "Have a good one, kiddo." Or, "You've got the spelling test today. You already know all of them." Or just, "It's taco night. Hang in there." Lily told him once, embarrassed, that she was too old for the notes, and he said, "Okay," and stopped. And 3 days later she asked, not quite looking at him, whether he could maybe still do the notes. He did the notes until she graduated. She has, to this day, a shoebox full of them, hundreds of torn scraps in blocky capitals. And she has told her mother that when she has children of her own, they are absolutely getting notes. Because Ray did learn to braid hair, and I love this part, so let me linger on it. Lily was 5, and she wanted her hair in a French braid like a girl at preschool. And Dana could do a regular braid, but not that one. And so one evening, Ray sat at the kitchen table with a comb, a fistful of yarn tied to a doorknob to practice on, and a video playing on his phone. A cheerful woman narrating over and over. Now, cross the left strand over the middle. Now, the right. He was a man whose hands could disassemble a heat pump blindfolded, and they shook trying to keep 3 pieces of yarn in order. It took him 2 weeks of practice on that doorknob, and then one morning he did it. A real French braid down the back of a 5-year-old's head. A little lumpy, one side tighter than the other, and Lily looked in the mirror and turned around and told him it was the best one she'd ever had. He kept the yarn tied to that doorknob for years. He said it was in case he got rusty. I think he just liked knowing it was there. They were not people who took big vacations, but every summer Ray loaded the van and took them up into the Cascades for a week of camping. The same site each year, by a lake cold enough to steal your breath. He taught Lily to fish there and to build a fire and to be quiet in the early morning when the mist sat on the water and the loons called across it. And when she was 7, he taught her to ride a bike on the gravel loop of that campground, running behind her with his hand on the seat, then letting go without telling her, the way every parent since the invention of the bicycle has done it. She rode 20 wobbling feet before she understood he wasn't holding on anymore. And the sound she made, that pure, astonished shriek of a child who has just found out she can do the thing, was a sound Ray said he'd trade a great many other memories to keep. Here is a small thing that became a large thing, the way small things do in a life. When Lily was 4, she couldn't reach the bathroom sink to brush her teeth. And instead of buying one of those plastic step stools, Ray built her one. He was not a fancy woodworker, but he could measure and cut and sand. And he made her a little wooden stool out of pine, just the right height, and he rounded every edge so she couldn't catch a shin on it. And on the underside, where nobody would ever look, he wrote her name and the date in pencil. Lily, and the year. She used that stool to reach the sink, and then to reach the counter to help him crack eggs, and then, years later, to reach the high shelf where they kept the good glasses. It got a coat of paint at some point, purple, her choice. It moved with them once. It is going to come back at the end of this story, so keep it somewhere in the back of your mind. The little purple stool with a name written under it in pencil. The years went by the way good years do, which is quietly, so that you almost don't notice them passing. Ray's business grew enough that he hired a second tech and stopped answering the phone at midnight, mostly. He and Dana got married when Lily was 6, a small thing in a friend's backyard, and Lily was the flower girl and took the job with tremendous seriousness, walking so slowly the ceremony nearly started without her. They were not rich. There were years the van needed more work than the accounts could easily cover, and Christmases that were smaller than Dana would have liked. But the house was warm. Ray made sure the house was always, always warm. It was the one thing he could give with certainty, and he gave it every winter without fail. He went to everything, too. That was the other thing about Ray, the going. Every recital, every school play, every band concert where 40 children murdered the same song at 40 slightly different speeds. Ray was there, 3rd row on the aisle, so that Lily could always find him from the stage. When she was 8, she had exactly 4 lines in a school production about the water cycle, dressed as a raindrop. And Ray took a half day he couldn't really afford to lose and sat through 90 minutes of other people's children to watch her deliver 4 lines about evaporation. And then he clapped like she had played the lead. There is a video somewhere of a grown man on his feet cheering for a raindrop. He wasn't performing being a father. He simply could not imagine being anywhere else on earth while she was up there being brave. And somewhere in those years, without anybody deciding it, Lily started calling him Dad. It wasn't a discussion. It wasn't a moment. It was just there one day, the way the change of a season is suddenly just there, and then you can't remember it being any other way. She said it at the dinner table. "Dad, can you pass the potatoes?" And Ray's hand did a small thing on the way to the dish, a little hitch, and then he passed the potatoes, and nobody made it into anything, because making it into something might have frightened it away. But that night, Dana told me later, she found him in the garage with the lights off, sitting on an upturned bucket, and she asked if he was all right, and he said he was fine. He was better than fine. He just needed a minute, and she left him his minute. Some feelings are too big to have in a lit room. By then, the town had long since made up its mind about the three of them, in the quiet way small towns do. At the diner in town, the one with the good pie, the waitress had known Lily since she rode in a high chair, and she always called Ray her dad, because what else would you call the man who'd been bringing her in for pancakes every Saturday morning for a decade? The man at the hardware store set aside the good lumber for him. Nobody in that town knew or cared what any certificate said in any drawer. To all of them, Ray and Dana and Lily were simply a family, one of the ordinary warm ones, and it was only the paperwork, off in a filing cabinet and a government computer somewhere, that hadn't yet gotten the message everyone else had known for years. So that was the shape of their life, and it was a good shape, and it might have stayed just that shape forever. A man who was dad in every way that mattered, and in no way that a filing cabinet would recognize. Lily had his last name in her heart, and her mother's on her school records, and a stranger's on the certificate in the drawer. 3 different answers to the same question, depending on which piece of paper you asked. And for a long time, that was fine, because they were happy. And happy people don't go looking for forms to fill out. Then Lily turned 12. And 12 is the age when children start to understand that the world runs on paper, and that the paper doesn't always tell the truth. It came up because of something small, the way the biggest questions always arrive dressed as small ones. There was a form for a school trip, one of those emergency contact and permission slips, and it asked for parent or guardian, and it asked for the relationship. And Lily was filling it out at the kitchen table one evening, and she stopped. Ray was at the stove. Dana was going through the mail. And Lily looked up and asked, in the careful voice of a kid who has been thinking about something for longer than the question suggests, what she was supposed to put for Ray. Because he was her dad, but the school had a different name in their computer, the name from the certificate. A man she had met twice and did not remember, and it made her feel, she said, like she was lying on the form when she wrote the truth. The kitchen grew very still. Ray turned the burner down. Lily sat at the table with a permission slip in front of her and a pen in her hand. After staring at the form for a long moment, she asked the question that quietly changed everything. Why doesn't the paperwork match the life we already have? Ray, who could fix almost anything, found himself facing the one problem he couldn't solve with his hands. He sat across from her and told her that nothing would make him happier than finding a way, though he didn't yet know if it could be done. But they would find out together. He said it with the calm confidence she needed. Later that night, sitting once again on the old bucket in the garage, he admitted aloud, for the first time in years, how much he hoped things could one day be made official. Dana joined him on the cold concrete floor, and together, they decided to try. For Dana, that decision carried something extra. Something she didn't say out loud on the cold garage floor, but told Ray a long time later. She had spent Lily's whole childhood quietly afraid that the frightened choices of her own young years had marked her daughter somehow, had left a father-shaped hole in her that nothing could ever quite fill. And watching Ray over these 10 years, watching him pack the lunches and learn the braids and sit through the raindrop play, she had slowly stopped believing in the hole at all. But she wanted, badly, for Lily to have it in writing. To be able to hold a document someday that said, in the plain, flat language of the state, that she had been chosen, on purpose, by a man who did not have to, and did anyway. Every child should get to hold a thing like that. Most never think to ask for it. Lily had asked. It is worth saying plainly what they were actually asking for, because it is not a simple thing, and the law does not make it simple, on purpose, because it is a serious thing. What Ray wanted was to adopt Lily, to become, not in feeling but in fact, in the records and the certificates and the eyes of the state, her father. And here is the part that made it hard, the part that turned a happy wish into a long and delicate year. A child, in the eyes of the law, is only allowed 2 parents at a time. For Ray's name to go onto that certificate, another name had to come off it first. Before Ray could legally become Lily's father, the law needed the man who already was, on paper, to stop being. There were only 2 ways that could happen. Shane could agree to it, sign a piece of paper giving up his rights and his claim, freely and with his eyes open, and let another man take the place he had left empty for a decade. Or, if he would not, a judge would have to decide that he had already, by his own long absence, given up the right to say no. Dana found a family lawyer 2 towns over, a calm, careful woman named Paula, who had done 100 of these and still, she said, cried at about 1/3 of them. Paula sat the 3 of them down, Ray and Dana and Lily too, because Paula believed in telling the child the truth in words the child could hold. And she explained the road ahead, without sugar and without fear. She said the first best thing was to ask Shane to consent, because a case where the other parent agrees is gentle and quick, and a case where he fights, or worse, where he neither agrees nor lets go, is long and uncertain. She said they would write to him, and she said, looking at Lily when she said it, that they should be prepared for any answer, including the one that hurts, because a man who has not shown up in 10 years is not a man whose next move you can predict. So they wrote to Shane. Paula did it properly, formally, a real letter to his last known address, laying out what they were asking and offering him the simple, dignified exit of a signature. And then, once again, the way this whole story had always gone where Shane was concerned, they waited. The answer, when it came, was no. It did not come gently. It came as a short, cold phone call to Dana, out of a number she hadn't seen in years. A voice she barely recognized saying he wasn't about to just sign his kid away to some furnace repairman. That was the phrase. Some furnace repairman. 10 years of silence, and the thing that finally woke him was not missing his daughter, but the idea of being erased from a piece of paper he had never once lived up to. He didn't ask how Lily was. He didn't ask what she looked like now, or whether she was happy, or what her voice sounded like. He just said no, because saying no cost him nothing, and let him feel for one afternoon like a father, which is a feeling he had spent a decade declining to earn. I told you this was a gentle story, and I meant it. So I am not going to spend Shane's one appearance making him a villain. The truth is sadder and quieter than that. He was a man protecting the last small idea he had of himself. The idea that he was still, technically, somebody's dad. And he was willing to stand in the doorway of his daughter's happiness to keep it. Not out of love, but out of the kind of pride that grows in the empty place where love was supposed to go. Ray, who had every reason to be furious, mostly felt sorry for him. He said later that he couldn't imagine having a daughter like Lily and choosing to be a name on a form instead of a man at the table. He said it the way you'd talk about someone who had frozen to death within sight of a warm house, which, in a way, Shane had. So the easy road was closed, and Paula sat them down again and told them about the hard one. And this is where the paperwork this story runs on quietly begins. She explained that the law does not actually let a parent disappear for 10 years and then use a signature he won't give as a lock on the door forever. When a mother and a stepfather ask a court to let the stepfather adopt and the other parent won't consent, the court is allowed to look at what that parent has actually done. And if it finds that he willfully deserted the child or neglected without any just cause to provide care and support for far longer than the law requires, then it can decide his permission simply isn't needed. A parent who walks away, the law says in its dry and careful way, forfeits the right to stand in the doorway. He does not get to be absent for a decade and present for one veto. What the court would need was proof of the absence, and the terrible, quiet truth was that the proof was everywhere, precisely because there was nothing. There was a child support record with his name on it and a balance of 0. 10 years of nothing ever paid, not once, not a dollar. There was a box in Dana's closet, the box every parent keeps, full of Lily's whole life, the hospital bracelet and the drawings and the report cards and the birthday photos, 10 years of a girl growing up in pictures. And the case, when Paula laid it out, was that Shane was in none of them. His absence had a shape you could hold. Every empty space where a father should have been was, it turned out, the evidence. They filed the petition in the late winter. And because the law is careful, and because even a man who has thrown away every chance is owed one more, Shane was formally served, given official notice, told the date, told he could come and stand up and contest it if he wished, told exactly how to be heard. The disappearing man was handed, by the state, a map back to the doorway, and a written invitation to walk through it. Then came the part of these stories nobody tells you about, which is the waiting. The long, ordinary months where nothing dramatic happens, and a family simply lives its life with a question hanging over the kitchen table. Winter turned to that wet Oregon spring, the valley going green and then greener. A caseworker came to the house, as they do, to see that Lily was safe and loved, and that this was a real home and not a paper one. And Lily, nervous, showed the woman her room and her books, and, without quite knowing why, the little purple step stool, and told her that her dad had made it before she could remember, and had written her name underneath. The caseworker, who had seen a great many homes, wrote something in her notes and did not say what, but she smiled on her way out and squeezed Dana's hand at the door. There was one fear that sat with Lily through all those waiting months, and she finally said it to Paula on the phone one evening, in a very small voice. She asked whether she was going to have to see him, Shane, whether she'd have to be in a room with the man whose name was on the paper, and talk to him, and have him look at her. And Paula, who was gentle but never once lied to a child, told her the truth, which was no. She said this part was between the grown-ups and the court, and that Lily's only job in the whole thing was to keep being a kid, and, when the day finally came, to answer one honest question from a judge. Lily let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for weeks. She had built the man into something enormous in her mind, the way we all do with the people who leave us. It helped a little to be told she would never have to stand next to the real size of him. Summer came. The court date was set for the fall. And in those slow, warm months, there was a conversation on the porch one evening that I want to give you, because it is the heart of the whole thing. Lily, 14 now, her birthday come and gone in the middle of all that waiting, asked Ray what happened if the judge said no. If Shane fought it, or the court decided the paper mattered more than the 10 years. She asked it looking out at the yard, not at him, the way you ask the questions you're most afraid of. And Ray told her the truest thing he knew. He said, "Nothing happens." He said, "If the judge says no, I drive us home, and I make dinner, and I fix the furnace before it gets cold, and I am your dad tomorrow, exactly as much as I am tonight, which is completely, which is all the way, which is forever." Because that part was never up to a judge, and it never will be. He said the paper isn't what makes it true. The paper is just the world finally writing down something that's been true for years. And then he said, "But I would like the world to write it down. I would like that very much." And Lily leaned her head on his shoulder on that porch in the long summer light, and neither of them said anything else, because nothing else needed saying.
The morning of the hearing, Ray wore a tie, which Lily had never once seen him do, and it was slightly crooked, and she fixed it for him in the car. And that small reversal, the child straightening the father's tie, is the kind of thing that undoes a person if they let it. So nobody in that car let it. They just drove to the county courthouse together, the three of them, with Paula meeting them on the steps. Shane did not come. He had been served. He had been given the date, the room number, the invitation. And on the morning it counted, the same way he had on every morning that had counted for 14 years, he simply was not there. There was an empty chair where the law had made room for him, and he did not fill it. And in the end, his absence in that courtroom was the last and clearest thing he ever said as Lily's father. The disappearing was complete. He had disappeared himself, right out of the story. And the quiet of that empty chair was louder than anything he could have stood up and shouted. The judge was an older man with reading glasses and a slow, deliberate way of speaking, and he did not rush it, because he understood what it was. He looked at the record, the 10 years, the balance of 0, the box with no father in it, the notice served, and the chair left empty. And he made his finding without drama and without cruelty, in the sober voice these things deserve. He found that Shane had, by long desertion and neglect, and without just cause, given up his right to prevent this, and that the court therefore did not require his consent. He said it plainly. He did not gloat, and neither will I, because a father throwing away a daughter like Lily is not a victory for anyone. It is just a sad thing a court has to write down before it can get to the good part. And then the judge got to the good part. He turned to Lily, because at 14, the law finally asks the child herself, in her own voice, what she wants. And he asked her, directly, gently, whether she wished for this man, Ray, to become her father in the eyes of the law. And Lily, who had rehearsed nothing, said yes. She said, "He already is.
He has been my dad my whole life. I would just like it to be true on the paper, too, so it matches." Which was, more or less, word for word, the question she had asked at a kitchen table 2 years before, come all the way back around as an answer. The judge signed the order. He said the words that made it so. That from this day forward, in the record and in the law, and in every place a name is written, Ray was her father, and that she would carry his name as her own. He read the new name aloud into the quiet of that courtroom. Her first name, which was hers already, and Ray's last name, now hers too, joined together and spoken by a judge as a single, true thing.
And the man who could fix anything, who had nursed a dying furnace back to life at 9 o'clock on the coldest night of the year, so a baby he'd never met could sleep warm, put his face in his shaking hands and could not speak. And it was Lily who reached over and held his hand, the way he had held hers through 100 fevers, and told him, "It was okay, Dad. It's okay. We can go home now." They went home. Ray made dinner. He checked the furnace, though it was only early October and it didn't need checking, because checking the furnace was how that man said, "I love you." And he had a great deal of love in him that night and needed somewhere to put it. A few weeks later, a plain envelope came in the mail, and inside it was a new birth certificate. And where a stranger's name had been for 14 years, now there was Ray's. Dana took the old one out of the drawer, the one from the frightened young days, and she did not throw it away, but she put it somewhere else, in a different box, because it was a piece of history now, and not a piece of the present. And Ray did one last thing, the thing I asked you to keep in the back of your mind. He turned the little purple step stool over, the one he'd built when Lily was 4, and under her name and the year she was born, in the same pencil, in the same careful hand, he wrote a second date. The day the world finally agreed with them. 2 dates now, on the underside of a homemade stool, where nobody would ever look. The day she came into the world, and the day she officially became his. Both of them true. Both of them written down. That is very nearly the end, and it is a happy one, and you can let yourself drift now if you're nearly there, because what's left is only warmth. But I promised you a wedding, and there is a wedding, and it is the best part, so stay with me one more minute if you can. It was years later, a long time down the road, on a bright afternoon in a garden not so far from that gravel road, and Lily was grown and she was getting married. And Ray, gray at the temples now, walked her down the aisle, steady as anything, holding it together the way he held everything together, because that was his job, and he was good at his job. He got her all the way to the front without his voice breaking once. He was proud of that. He'd practiced. What he had not practiced for was this. Lily and the man she was marrying had asked the officiant to read something, a small thing, near the beginning of the ceremony, and it was not from a poem or a book. It was one plain sentence about a day, some years before, when a man had gone to a courthouse and stood up and asked to become this woman's father, and had been told yes, and the officiant read the date of that day out loud. The very date Ray had written in pencil under a purple stool, and said that everyone gathered here already knew what the paper had only caught up to, which was that Ray had been her father all along. And that was the thing that finally got him. The strong, quiet man who had held the whole aisle together came apart right there in the front row of his daughter's wedding, in front of everyone, and he did not try to hide it.
And Lily stepped over and took his hand before she took her husband's, and held it, and let him have his minute, the way her mother once had, in a dark garage, the way he had given her 1,000 minutes over a whole life of them. Some feelings are too big to have in a lit room. But some, it turns out, you get to have in a garden full of sunlight, surrounded by everyone you love. And those are the very best ones of all. The little purple stool was there too, if you're wondering. It held the guest book right by the door, so that everyone who came to celebrate Lily had to pass the thing her father built her before she could remember, with 2 true dates written underneath in pencil, where nobody would ever think to look. Nobody looked. They didn't have to. The whole day was the thing the underside of that stool had been quietly saying all along. So that is the story, and I hope it sat as warm with you as it did with me. There was no villain in it worth the name. Only a man who kept coming back, and a man who kept leaving, and a girl who was loved so completely by the one who stayed that the one who left stopped mattering years before a judge ever made it official. That is what a father is in the end. Not a name on a certificate, not a fact of biology. Just the person who keeps the house warm and keeps coming back and is still holding your hand at the front of the room when you finally can't hold yourself up. If this one kept you good company tonight, you can leave a like to help someone else find it in the dark. And if you'd like more slow, warm, true-to-life stories like this one, I'd be glad to have you subscribe and settle in with me again. And I'll leave you with the gentlest of questions to carry off to sleep. No need to answer it tonight, just to hold it. Who was the person who kept your house warm? Who kept coming back? Maybe tomorrow you tell them. And if you feel like it, whenever you wake, drop a note about where in the world you were listening from tonight. Because I do love knowing who's out there in the quiet with me. That's all for now. The house is warm, the paper matches. Sleep well, and I'll see you in the next one.